Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 265. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's guest, Andrea Hollander, is here. She'll be with us in about 5 minutes. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring that bell for notifications. Whatever you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be much appreciated. Now, as we always do, or usually when we can, we like to start out with our Poets Respond poet for today, talking about something from the news and current events. And, a lot of times the poems come about from the big topic that everybody's talking about, but sometimes they come from more interesting things, and we like to put those poems in too. That's actually why I do a Sciku at the end of the show, just to show you can just do things about science articles, and that's what Lexi Pelle did, today's poet, and here she is. Hey, Lexi, how you doing? Yeah, it's great to see you. And this is your second time in Poets Respond. You've been in Rattle 2. It's great to see you again. So tell us what was the topic. How did you find this article and why did it spark your interest?
Just look at the articles on Science News every single day. And usually with a little part of the back of my mind is anything sparking a poem? Does this sound like a poem? And this particular one, I honestly just clicked on. The picture was so cute. It was a picture of a baby elephant, and it was so cute. I was like, okay, I want to read this article. And a lot of my poems I kind of just have a title, and I thought this would be kind of a funny title, and I just see what I could do with it, and that's kind of what sparked it, because that's what the article was about, was that, elephants are left or right trunked. They tend to move their trunk to the left or the right, just the way humans have a left and a right hand. So I just thought that was really interesting. And so it's I think there's something there, and I just kind of played with it from there.
Yeah, it's really interesting, that topic of handedness, especially, so often we do on this show talk about the hemispheres of the brain too, and how creativity comes from one, and you're trying to break through the models of the other, and that has to do with that bilateral nature of animals, which is just fascinating. Before we talk about more, why don't you go ahead and read the poem, and then because you went from there to a surprising place. So why don't you read it, and we can all enjoy that together.
How to tell a right-trunked elephant from a lefty. Check for the side with ruffled whiskers and wrinkles. Elephants tend to tilt their trunks to scoop fruit, so one half's always a bit shabbier than the other. The end of my husband's left eyebrow is sparse because of the direction he faces while sleeping. All those beat-up tractors heaping diesel across our fields, the fluorescent smirk of strip malls I see as I speed down Route 22. The Canada geese, those trucker swans, those bootlegged angels, if God's got a rumpled, favored side, we're it. We're the word that's been written with a dominant hand. Is it because we longed for more legible script? A world we'd slide our sorrows down as long as it was written in smooth cursive? We're ready to unknow now. When we place Bibles in roadside motel rooms, slide flowers into the spokes of white bikes, when a woman calls the cops and orders half pepperoni, half mushroom while her husband goes to give her daughter a goodnight kiss, we aren't asking for answers. We're asking God to switch hands.
Yeah, that's such a surprising, place that poem went. And I think it felt to me like you didn't know where it was going and just followed the thread of your imagination where it would take you, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what happened. I was just kind of having fun with this idea of shabbiness and whatever. I kind of had that initial idea of the turn, if God's got a rumpled favorite side. And so I kind of knew that I was trying to get somewhere around there. And then I really didn't know where I was going to go. So I was and I just kind of played, I mean, I do that with all my poems, but I really was just kind of just seeing. A lot of times I'll write things and I'm is that true? Is that true enough? Is there something more true? And I just keep trying to write toward a truer truth, which is kind of what happened.
Yeah, well, you can definitely feel it in that poem. And going to the place that, the question, and it's one of those poems that I like to read over and over again to sort of untangle, because it's got enough substance to chew on, but then you want to dig down a little more into who that we is, which is really interesting too. And I noticed, because you've been submitting a lot to Poets Respond, similar, articles, like sciencey, sort of strange, odd, quirky, and then the title of the article, I think, becomes the title of the poem. So I was wondering too if you're working on a project. Like, is there a book thing coming up with these types of poems, or is it just something you like to do?
No, I think it's more just like to hold myself accountable. So it's like it's like almost like a prompt that I have for myself. I'm like, well, let me just try to do like one every 2 weeks or something. And so it's just kind of like a way of not feeling like, well, what am I going to write about? I'm like, well, I can find one article, and usually like I know the way my mind works. Like if it is a quirky story, I know that like I can kind of have something to play with. So it's just more just something fun. There's no no real end goal at the moment. But yeah, I just kind of like the idea of like taking something kind of strange and seeing like what can I do with this. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we're grateful to have you doing that, because there are always good poems every week. If it's like a slow news week, I hope there's something from you to come in. This wasn't, but it was nice to take a break from all that's going on and do something a little more fun. Well, thanks for being here. And you're going to be a guest on the main Rattlecast. We emailed about that earlier on December 8th. So already mark your calendars, because Lexi's got a book out too, not too long ago. So we'll share that. But thanks for joining today and for sharing this poem today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yep, take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, and that was Lexi Pelle with today's poem of the day, How to Tell a Right-Trunked Elephant from a Lefty. All right, so now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Andrea Hollander. So sit tight, and I'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Like I said, today's guest is Andrea Hollander. Andrea is the author of 6 full-length collections, including Blue, Mistaken for Sky, which was a finalist for the 2018 Best Book Award in Poetry for the American Poetry Fest, and Landscape with Female Figures, New and Selected Poems, which was a finalist for the Oregon Book Award. For more than 22 years, Hollander served as the writer-in-residence at Lyon College, which awarded her the Lamar Williamson Prize for excellence in teaching. In 2011, she moved to Portland, Oregon, where she continues to mentor writers individually and to teach. In 2017, she established the Ambassador Writing Seminars, which she taught in her home until COVID, when she switched to Zoom. So she's a veteran of Zoom here. Her most recent book, and the one we're going to focus on today, is Right Here and Now Nowhere But Here, which came out from Terrapin Books in 2023. And here she is, Andrea Hollander. Hey, Andrea, how you doing?
Hi, Tim. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I still remember the time you came to our office in Studio City, which few people have done, because as you might remember, it's like a real estate office. It has nothing to do with poetry. and and you came to record a poem or a couple poems that we'd published of yours just on my little recorder there in the break room. So it's nice to see you again. It's been a bit.
It was fun. I think the night before I gave a reading at a bookstore in LA, and you came to the reading in a baseball uniform.
Oh,
I will never forget that.
That's really funny. So yeah. Oh, I do remember. So I had a game. It wasn't after the game. That would have been bad if I was like covered in dirt. It was before, but I had to go right from the reading to the game, and that used to happen a lot when I was in LA. I played a lot of baseball. Yeah. Well, it's really fun to have you on again. Why don't we start out with a poem?
Okay.
Hang on. Everybody's saying they're saying they're static. Static is back. Okay. So. Let's see. We might have to take a break and sort of try to fix this. I'm not sure. Static on all the mics coming in. They're static just when the guest speaks. So that's not on my end. Only when the guest is talking. Let's. I think what we're gonna do is pause, reconnect everything, and hopefully that'll just go away. Because I don't know what else to do. I'm not hearing static. When guest is speaking, there's static. Okay.
Tim, should I reboot my computer?
No, because it was having for Lexi to do. It's my computer. You just sit right there. I'll turn everything off and turn it back on. And hopefully that'll be fixed, because I'm not sure what the issue could be. Okay. Yeah, just when the guest speaks. Okay, well, we'll try to reconnect. Hey, hang on 1 second, everybody. We'll be right back. And this will be cut out, of course, from the audio versions. Okay, we'll be right back. And we're back. So we need the audiences, because I cannot tell that this is happening on my end whatsoever. So listen to Andrea talk, and we'll see. So hi, Andrea. How are you doing?
Hi, Tim. I hope that I'm clear.
Yeah, I hope so too. Clear. Yeah, I don't know what could possibly causing it. Let's see. Is it better now? Okay, it's better now. So it must be. I don't know what that could have been, but that was strange, because it Yeah, so thanks, Carla. Carlos was better. Let me get one more confirmation that it's better. Is it working fine for everybody? Okay, good. So I don't know. It must have been some weird Zoom thing, I guess, because everything sounded great for me. Okay, phew. Well, we can go on and do a show. Hopefully, we'll see how bad it was. Maybe it's something for the audio version. I can like cut out the background noise for Lexi, and then maybe that's still salvageable. But anyway, okay, so thanks, everybody, for being patient. We still have 60-plus people watching live just on the one thing I'm looking at now, so that's great, too. Now we're better. So, as I was about to say, Andrea, do you want to start out by reading a poem?
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me. One after another. As if without a man, winter could take over. But I loved winter, love winter still. So what am I trying to say? Maybe it's that barrenness, those empty branches, that too much sky. The old cherry tree in front of my childhood home in New Jersey did not yield cherries. That crepe myrtle in Arkansas that I planted with my ex when our son was born, its flowers white, though the nursery promised blue. The pink blossoms of those hydrangeas my father placed by the front steps that changed color when he limed the soil. One man after another, my 20s defined by them, as if being alone meant nothing could bloom. When you set out certain trees, pears, apricots, plums, you need at least two, or they'll flower but won't bear fruit. I learned this firsthand from the orchard we cleared from the forest where we lived, that husband and I. He wasn't my only. I married the first because I feared my father's insistence that college was a marriage market and I was about to graduate. Fiasco after fiasco, I should have waited. But how do we know what we need to know and when to know it? Last week, the man I loved 50 years ago wrote to me, then phoned. I don't remember why I left him, or did he leave me? In late winter, I look for the purple tips of crocuses that show up sometimes where I did not plant them.
Yeah, beautiful poem, beautiful metaphor there. That was one after another. Again, this is Andrea Hollander with her new book, her most recent book, But Now, Nowhere But Here. So, Andrea, we get a sense of your style in that poem. I'm always curious about how poets came to be poets. What was the thing that made you, fall in love with poetry? Is it something that you always did from a very early age, or is it something that you started later? Is there something? What made you fall in love with poetry and want you to make a poet?
Well, probably a number of things. And sometimes we fall in love with something or someone without even knowing it's happening. I think I've credit my father, who was a pediatrician and a kind of science guy, but he talked about having taken literature classes in college. And we had one book on the shelf in the family room, a book of poetry, and we had a lot of art books, but those were really the main books in the house. And every once in a while, my dad would go over to the shelf and very dramatically pull that book off the shelf and read a poem out loud and put it back on the shelf and run back downstairs to his office, which was on the first floor of our house, his pediatric office. I loved that. And was also a little bit intimidated by my father in many ways. But I think that his joy with poetry, and all of these were poems that were metered rhyme poems, probably very famous, but all of those at the time I didn't know it. Mm-hmm. So maybe part of my falling in love with poetry had to do with that. The other part has to do with the fact that as a kid, I did write. I wasn't writing poems really, but I was writing plays with my cousin Brenda, who lived next door, and we would perform them for our parents. And when I was in my early 20s, my mother died of cancer, and she was only 51 years old. And she and I were very close. And I think that her death, as often is the case with all of us when someone dies or anything dramatic and tragic happens, we do turn to poetry, whether we're ever written one or not. So I was especially then drawn to wanting to figure it out. How was I going to deal with this? So that in part was I started writing. That they really weren't poems. They looked like poems, but they weren't. And I knew they weren't very good. And I needed to read poetry. suddenly with a passion. And I lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the time, and went to a bookstore near where I lived and asked the proprietor for an anthology of poems that people might use when they're looking for a poem to read at a funeral.
Hmm.
I don't remember the name of the anthology, but I started reading it and weeping
Hmm.
and also feeling as though someone else, this poet whom I didn't know, was speaking my heart, speaking my feelings with language I didn't have yet. And so that's those two things, my father and my mother's death, really brought me to poetry.
Yeah, that was really such a touching story. Let's hear another poem next.
Okay, well, this one isn't about any of that. Sand. This is how I see her now, 22, and wearing a blue bathing suit, her first two-piece, but not yet a bikini, and walking an empty beach in late afternoon, tossing a chunk of driftwood to her dog, big and gray, who galumphs back each time, clumps of wet sand flying, the dog soaked, dripping, sometimes dragging a tangle of dark green kelp, of dark green, sorry, of sometimes dragging a tangle of dark green kelp he drops at her feet, the stick forgotten, and she laughs at the sight of him. And this goes on until they both tire and she finds a place among the dunes to lie down, the dog panting at first beside her, then quieting, the steady rhythm of the ocean calming until the dark cloud of a man hovers above them. And if not for the dog, the rest of this story would consist of details you would not want to read. Words like crush and straddle, split and thrust, if I dared write about it. And although later she finds sand in the grooves of her sandals, and even after a shower, more between her toes and in her scalp, thanks to her dog, now decades dead, sand is still a word she can love.
Yeah, it's a powerful poem, Sand, by Andrea Hollander from her most recent book, Now, Nowhere But Here. So once you realized that you wanted to start writing poetry, how did you go about tackling that? Like, what did you seek out, and how did you progress? How did you develop your voice? Because you do have a very distinctive voice, which is very much sort of a confidant kind of voice. Like, there's a real honesty and authenticity to what you're saying, and it feels like you're telling us, the truth from some deep place. How did you go about, approaching that and finding your voice?
Oh, what a complicated question, really. Um, Several ways. First of all, I don't have an MFA. I didn't study poetry with a mentor. So I was kind of alone in terms of my apprenticeship to how to write poetry, how to write good poetry. Um, and so one of the main things I did is as I was falling in love with other people's poems, I said to myself, well, being an apprentice to an art like poetry is kind of like being an apprentice magician. And a great magician performs tricks but does not tell you how they are done. So my job as an apprentice is to figure out what the tricks are and try to perform them myself. So that is how I approached poetry, thinking that a poem that I fell in love with, and I would read the poem over and over again. And even though I knew what was happening next, and even memorized some of the poems, I did not, I didn't know how it was done. But then I started looking at, for example, the diction. I found that some of the best poems don't use the phrases that we use in ordinary speech, like there is, there are, there, all of that kind of language. So I saw that there was a pristine essence to the poems I was falling in love with. And then the other thing is that I was in graduate school at some point after I started writing poems. I was in graduate school for comparative literature. And after a semester of graduate school in comparative literature, I realized that this isn't exactly what I want.
Hmm.
And I remembered a class I took as an undergraduate when I decided I needed to not just be an English major because there was nothing I was going to be able to do with it after I graduated other than be happy that I read certain books and talked about them. And if I wanted to have a teaching certificate, I had to take either a class in speech or in something called the oral interpretation of literature. And I
Hmm.
found out that that was the learning how to read literature out loud,
Oh, hmm.
dramatize it, but to read it as if the author were in the audience. The author would say, "Yeah, that's how exactly how I want it."
Hmm.
Um, and I was terrible at that
Hmm.
as an undergraduate, but I remembered how exciting it was to finally actually be okay at it. So at in graduate school, I went to the Department of Theater and Dance, where there was a wonderful woman named Lee Potts who taught oral interpretation of literature, which is really the oral presentation of literature.
Hmm.
And even though I took as many classes as I could and got a kind of double degree in comparative literature and oral interpretation. But what I didn't realize I was learning was in reading aloud, in reading poems aloud, reading anything aloud that's well written, or even if it isn't well written, um, you learn to listen to the music, the texture of the language. I learned how to hear literature and hear good literature. And so I found myself writing to my ear instead
Hmm.
of brain.
Yeah.
Not that my brain wasn't involved.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It is something that we frequently struggle with is how to present poems. But the key, I think, you put it really right, and the way to write too is to read a lot, but not only read, but read out loud to understand the music of speech. I remember I went to Maria Gillen's workshop to present in her class and read some poems. And I read a poem, and then she said, "See, kids, there's a person who's read a lot of poetry. Can you hear that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do. I read poetry constantly." And you kind of have to develop an ear for how language presents itself, and how the music comes to be. The way that everything's like subtly rhymes. It's kind of like a dance in your mouth. And to pick up that dance, you have to practice and perform it a lot. And reading poems out loud is the best thing you can possibly do. I think with that in mind, I want to talk about that more, but let's read another poem, and if you don't mind being put on the spot for how you present a poem, but we'll pay a little more attention to how you read it and talk a little more about that, because that's a really fun topic that we don't get to discuss much.
Okay,
So the next poem up, I think, is After Reading That Empathy Cannot Be Learned. Yeah.
correct. After reading that empathy cannot be learned, I believed I could imagine how my father felt when he told me outside my mother's hospital room that this was the worst day of his life. Either you had empathy or you didn't, the book said, and I wondered if I did. I wasn't to confuse it with sympathy. When you felt sympathy, you recognized suffering, but were outside it. Empathy took you inside someone else's feelings through your imagination, as if those feelings were your own. My father was saying words in that colorless way he sometimes did, as if meaning had escaped him. He had not said she was dead, and it didn't occur to me that she could be. Maybe you can't feel empathy until the loss is your own. I'd read the poem by Dylan Thomas that ends, "After the first death, there is no other." And no one I loved had died. Every day after work, I'd come here to see her. Once in her hospital bathroom, I tried on a new dress with a low-cut back, twirling for her the way I did at home when she made all my dresses on her Singer. A nurse entered, catching me mid-twirl, glanced at my mother, glared at me, and on her way out made that tisk tisk sound with her tongue that meant she disapproved and wanted me to know it. Don't worry about her, my mother said after she left. I can't describe, even now, what I felt for my mother. Mother love, it could be called, or daughter love, which the book didn't even mention. She and I were in this together, whatever this was. Now I stood outside her hospital room with my father on the worst day of his life. When I opened the door and went in, it became mine.
Yeah, another wonderful, powerful poem from And Now Nowhere But Here from Andrea Hollander. That was after reading that empathy cannot be learned. And so taking away, from how you present there, the poem, I think that the thing that stand out right away is that you take your time with it. Like you sort of respect the poem is, I guess, maybe one of the things that stands out the most. When we're reading poems, we tend to be a little nervous, and we kind of rush through and don't think people want to hear this. But of course, everybody's here to hear it. So that's one of the things that we do. But what advice did you learn in those classes, and how do you go about presenting a poem?
Well, one of the things I learned in Lee Potts's classes was that the performance begins when you are introduced. You are already, and I don't mean that you're performing, but that people are paying attention. And so what often we all do, even when we're reading a poem we love, even our poem or somebody else's, is we tend to drop our voices at the end as if, okay, now I'm done. And then we kind of wreck the last line, and usually the end of the poem, if it isn't heard, the poem isn't done yet. So that was one thing very important, that every word matters and that the audience needs to hear every word. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, I'm my own audience when I'm writing, and I write, but I also read out loud every change that I make in a revision. I read the whole poem. If I change one word, I read the entire poem from the title down. So I get a lot of practice, and I can also start to hear where I am rushing through a line when I'm reading it. And if I'm rushing through it, why am I rushing through it? I ask myself, well, maybe there are too many words in that line. Maybe there's something that's not quite right about that line. So I'm, of course, in my own space, nobody else is around, and yet it's still important, even for my own ears to hear it.
Yeah. So the other thing too is, articulating very clearly the poem. One of the things that I have trouble with, I tend to talk and think fast, and so I know I kind of go too fast in poems, and I don't know if I should slow myself down, because especially with my own, that's how I hear them. But you do have to get them through to the audience. So are there any exercises to actually articulate and put forth the poem in the way you want to hear it?
Not really. I make sure that I have water if I'm going to do a reading for an audience. So I have my water today here too. I don't think there's anything specific that I do to exercise my mouth, except that I live alone now, and I notice that sometimes I'll answer the phone at, say, 1:00 in the afternoon, and I sound like a frog. I realize I haven't talked to anyone. I haven't said anything. So I want to make sure that before I read to an audience, at least, that I've at least exercised my mouth by speaking.
And then staying within the poem too. That's another thing that happens, is that you start to, as soon as you stop thinking about the actual thing you're presenting, your mind, you can't help it, especially you've read these poems, I don't know, hundreds of times. So you're, eventually start to daydream. Do you have to focus on the poem? Is that another thing that's part of that?
Well, that is a very interesting question. I don't know about you, Tim, but I do try to make myself be the audience and the reader of the poem and the writer of the poem all at once, which is pretty tangled, to use a word that you used earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yet I'm able to do it. I mean, obviously not completely because I slipped up when I was reading the first poem today, and that's partly nerves. Um, so yeah, I don't think that I know what you mean about your mind trying to be in one place and yet you know that you're reading and you're being recorded or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to forget that. But I try to be my own audience. I try to read so that if I were an audience member and had never heard these words or these poems before, that when I slow down enough and enunciate and pronounce words the way they're supposed to be pronounced, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think about it when I start reading. I just try to be in the poem, in the moment that the poem is describing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, those nerves are just such a funny thing. I remember the first time I did a lot of taped audio shows back before the Rattlecast on the radio. I did several with Poets Cafe in Los Angeles, but they were recorded in the studio, and they were all, you had the headphones, you had the mics, everything was very official, and I was like used to that. That felt fine. Then they called me in for a fundraiser. And for the first time ever, I was live on the air, and I thought, well, it's the same studio, it's the same everything will be fine. And we were talking before we were about to go on air, and then that on-air light went on right in front of me, this big red buzzer type light. And they asked me something, and I was totally frozen for what felt like, I don't know, just like staring at the light, thinking about my voice being on the airwaves, like through the air, was just something I was not prepared at all for that to even be a worry. And then all of a sudden I was like, and then I don't know, it felt like a long time. I never went back and listened to that, but I don't. It might have been a short time, but for me, it was like an eternity. Like I lived a whole separate life in that moment where I couldn't even form a single word for a second. So, but then now going on live is like nothing. So it's sort of like this hurdle you have to get through. Whether it's like performing, reading in front of a crowd of people, or it's doing a live show or doing it, doing here, every space is different. And once you get through that nervousness, I think, then it works, right?
Yeah, well, you're there. You better do as best you can.
Okay. Well, let's read another poem, and then I want to talk more about the book too.
Okay. The title of this poem runs right into the first line. Not much snow last night, but enough to powder the sidewalk at midnight when I looked down from my fourth-floor apartment. This morning, the scraping sound of a shovel made me think of my father back in New Jersey, in that life that lives only when I remember it. Dad in his gray wool coat and woolen fedora with its tiny yellow feathers sewn into the band, outdoors before anyone else in the house is up. The snow, only an inch thick at most, our flagstone walkway cleared, and Dad now on the sidewalk nearly to the corner, his scraping faint but persistent enough to wake my mother, soon in her white chenille bathrobe, those same backless slippers, standing at the picture window in that living room of that house. My younger brother still asleep upstairs, Mom about to yell up to him to get dressed and go out to help. I was not there, but I lived in that house till I left for college, and I know what I know. Today's light snow, followed by the sound of shoveling on a street in Portland, Oregon, will bring me my father in winter, years before the Alzheimer's takes hold, determined as always to do everything himself. And months before she finds the lump, my mother trying to make him stop, my brother decades before his own diagnosis, oblivious that anything worse will ever disturb him more than our mother's voice calling him away from his safe, warm bed.
Yeah, that was Not Much Snow Last Night. Again, poems from Andrea Hollander's And Now Nowhere But Here. And so many of your poems, Andrea, at least the ones I'm familiar with, are about your father. And I always wonder, one of the advice I give to people when they're writing is to have somebody in mind that they're writing to. Like, that's a way that we develop a voice that does feel honest and natural, is that we imagine speaking these poems to somebody. And given that your father was such a big figure in your life, such an interesting person with so much there between you, is that, and he was the one who introduced you to poetry too, as you mentioned before. So is there a way that you're writing like for him in a way? I was wondering about that.
That's a very interesting question, Tim. I'm not sure. I miss my father.
Mm-hmm.
I miss my mother. I miss my brother who died eventually as well. And so I'm an orphan. Uh, I think that partly, I think of poetry in some ways, especially poetry about one's own life, is a way of holding on to it and holding on to the people in it. I remember Ted Kooser once saying that the reason he puts, let's say, the name of a neighbor in his poem is to keep him alive,
Hmm.
to keep
Yeah.
that neighbor alive. And so there is probably some aspect of it. Um, whatever sadnesses come into our lives that we aren't prepared for, even if we think we're prepared for them, they don't ever let go. But we have to live our lives, and we should live our lives. We should go forward. It's just when I'm sitting down to write poetry, I get flooded by some aspect of some moment that for some reason I'm remembering something. And so this poem that I just read, Not Much Snow Last Night, it really it came from the sound of
Mm-hmm.
that. And suddenly I was back in New Jersey in the house that I mostly grew up in, and all my family was there.
Hmm.
And they aren't there anymore. I mean, they aren't, but they are here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So what is the writing process like for that? Like you mentioned that it came from the sound. Is that how you usually write a poem? Is it the sound? Do you know what you're going to be writing about, or does it surprise you very often?
well, I found out that the best way for me to write a poem is to not think I'm writing a poem.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes I just give myself exercises to distract myself from writing something I already know. Because what I really want to do is find out something I didn't know I knew, or something I knew but have buried, and probably buried it because I was told that these are not things that we're supposed to think about or talk about or dwell upon. So one of the exercises I give myself is to open either a book of poetry by one poet or an anthology, open at random, write down on my own in my own notebook. I always write in a ring binder. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
spiral bound notebook. Anyway, I write down the first line that I see on the page, at the top of the page, whatever side of the page, and I write down the page number, and I close the book.
Hmm.
And then I used to put my kitchen timer on, but now I don't need to do anything. But I would put my kitchen timer on for 10 minutes.
Hmm.
And then my assignment was that that line, uh, not anything I ever planned, I have to finish. I have to write a poem that starts with that line. And if and I can't stop my pen from moving across the page. If I stop, then I have to write that first line again. And
Hmm.
so in 10 minutes, the alarm would go off, and either I'd stop because, oh, thank goodness I didn't get anywhere with this. But quite often, even now, quite often, I will just not, if I had the alarm, I wouldn't listen to it anyway. But sometimes I just didn't hear it because I was suddenly in that zone that psychologists have written about and
Mm-hmm.
neurologists, um, where that you're just following your pen, you're following your brain. So that is something I do in order to not start with something that I know. So, and I'm sure you and probably most of the people in the audience this evening uh, may have read Richard Hugo's The Triggering Town. And his concept was that um, something triggers you. You start to write about that. But the poem won't be a real poem unless you find yourself discovering something that you weren't planning to say or write
Hmm.
and hadn't thought about. And so I think that's kind of the triggering versus discovered. So if my exercise ends up just being still about something I thought I was going to write about, it doesn't usually feel like a finished poem or a good poem. But one part of that little assignment I give myself is that I have to, at the end, if I finish the writing something that feels like it might be worth working on, I have to take that line that I borrowed out.
I was just going to ask that. Yeah,
Have
if
it.
you remove it. Hmm.
Cannot leave it. I have to, and I can't just make a imitation of it. I have to find my own first line. So that's part of it. And if I can't find my own first line, then I have to use an epigraph on the poem that says, beginning with a line by Philip Levine or something, whoever it is.
Hmm.
And so that's part of how I escape from writing the same poem over and over again, or at least I hope I. I know that the subjects that I end up being obsessed by, and the poems seem to reflect that, and I'm sure people are thinking about that right now, is that you can't not be yourself. You can't not write what matters to you. But if you only write about that, something feels stale in that
Hmm.
case.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's such a great exercise on like a number of levels, because first of all, we have this idea that we don't have time to write. I mean, I feel like I don't until I sit down and make myself do it. And so that idea of 10 minutes is so crucial, because you can find 10 minutes in your day. If you can't find 10 minutes in your day, I can't find anybody who can't find 10 minutes in their day, even if you think you can't. So there's that
Exactly.
aspect to it. Every long journey comes with a small step, and if you do that every day, and 1 out of 10 times a poem comes of it, you'll have 40 poems at the end of the year, which is a book. you know,
Exactly.
and so it's really that easy. You just have to sit down and do it. And so there's that aspect of it too. And then the aspect of not having any directive, not knowing where you're going to go, because the whole getting into that flow state that you talked about comes from having no aim. Like, no aim is necessary. The quote from Zen in the Art of Archery. If you
Yes.
have an aim, you'll miss the target, because you're too focused on yourself and what you're doing and not letting yourself go. And to be creative, you have to let yourself go. So really great exercise on multiple levels. So I'm glad we could share that, and everybody should try it out. Oh, we got to read another poem. Let's do another poem.
Okay. Phone call from my brother. When the phone rang, I think I was reading, but now I can't remember. I do remember that as he spoke, I watched a pair of crows bustling on a branch of the elm. The chemo stopped working, he said, but now he felt better than he had in months. I think that's what he said. No more side effects. Elm leaves loosened and floated down, flat yellow flakes of autumn against the red brick wall across the alley. He also said something about his daughter's job at the convenience store, something about his wife's car. After the call, I walked to the pharmacy for shampoo I didn't need. The crows in the elms stayed calm as I wandered out. He said it was, though, still a matter of time, didn't he? The pigeons on the sidewalk scattered to let me pass.
Yeah, another great ending to that poem too. Phone call for my brother from And Now Nowhere But Here by Andrea Hollander. And let's talk about that, because several people have mentioned before how great your endings are, and they all are really great. I think a lot of that comes from the way that we you're not writing towards something, so when you get to the end, you've like it's found what you're looking for in a weird way on like some subconscious level. But how do you go about that, finding the ending?
Um, I feel it in my body. Does that sound pretentious? I hope not.
No, I don't think
Because
so. I don't think so at
it
all.
feels as though it's something that's being delivered to me, but not by me. And we call, the muse has visited or whatever we want to say, but it's that kind of surprise. I'm surprised by something, and I feel it. I feel it when I read other people's poems when they touch me, and quite often, uh, following the journey that the poet is giving you through the poem, from the title to the last line. Uh, Richard Hugo talks about it. Every line should be unpredictable, but not replaceable.
Hmm.
It is exactly what it should be. And so, not that I'm thinking that, but I feel, oh, something is coming in. And if I start thinking, oh, something's coming in, I lose it.
Hmm.
So it's just a matter of practice. I think that the more times we sit down, even if it's those 10 minutes that you mentioned, um, even if it's just for a short time, if you're focused on being receptive to something that you didn't plan to say, you more than likely might say it.
Hmm. Yeah, and it should be pointed out too that this idea of expressive writing for 10 minutes a day really has health benefits too. As we talked to James Pennebaker, the psychiatrist at University of Texas, about it actually lowers your blood pressure and it makes you sleep better and all sorts of things. So it's like, I mean, you could buy like a meditation app and have, those kind of benefits, or you could write and have wonderful poems and a whole world of poetry come out of it. So it's a really great thing to do, writing poems. To talk more about the process, Nancy Tinnell wanted to know, is this a stream of consciousness writing? And I assume that you have you end up with a big wall of sort of sometimes illegible like handwriting, and then you craft that into the poem afterward. Is that the process, or did they come out sort of like this? Yeah.
No, my first drafts, they look like my handwriting, and then as if something feels like it's working, I'm reading it out loud, as I said, and then I could cross out a few words or cross out a line and then write something, and then I read it out loud again, and then it gets to be a very messy page. So then I go to the computer and type it, but then I don't work on the computer. I print it out, and then I read aloud that piece of paper with the new version, and can't see the old version, but I never throw them away. I mean, what I mean is I keep in my computer file all the versions of the poem, because sometimes you can revise a poem to death, and then it really isn't a good thing at the end. I don't know if I'm answering your question or wandering.
No, well, wander away. It's great to hear all this stuff. But I think, too, in revising a poem to death is something important to remember, too, as we talk about that flow state. There's sometimes I get a submission. This happened so many times over the years where you could feel that, like, both music and sort of emotional energy. Then you hit one stanza and you sort of fall over the poem and you're like, what? And then you come back into it again. And it always ends up, sometimes the poem is great, but there's that one line or stanza or whatever. And I'll say to the poet, that's great, but what happened with this line? We got to figure something out here, this stanza. And they'll say, oh, that's the one that I workshopped a bunch, And, everybody told me this, and you try to think, and then you're using your sort of rational brain to sort of impose your will onto the poem rather than let that flow come out wherever that magical space it comes from. And then you have this stilted, strange, not fitting, and it's not flowing, and you can hear it if you read enough poems. And so we go back to the old version, and they show me that, and the old version's great. And I'm like, well, you just shouldn't have listened to your people in your workshop, because it was fine. That's a little strange that you mentioned that, but it still works. So just leave it. And
Exactly.
That's happened dozens of times over the years. Yeah. Let's see. So one of the things about endings, because we were talking about that, is that there's a way that you can sort of fall into having the same sort of dum-dum-dum-dum, there's a strong ending, and there's different types of endings. Do you pay attention to that at all? Trying not to, a lot of times it feels like you can go for the killer gong last line, that's just hammering it home, and it feels so good. But if you do that poem after poem, it sort of, you almost expect it. So I don't know, do you play with the way you end poems on a level like that?
Well, I try. But I think that for me, I want to feel as though I'm landing in a new place at the end of a poem. So it's just the way I have to write, or maybe it's what I have to share. Sometimes I write beyond an ending. because I don't think I'm there yet. So maybe there are poems of mine. I know that I'm going to read two more poems with you today, and one of them is longer than most of my poems, and it does feel like it has multiple endings until it gets to its ending, and that was an interesting process as well.
Well, we actually have three poems left. Do you want to read the Abad? Do you say Abad? I always don't know that word. Abad in late September, or is it Abade?
Oh, I didn't realize I had sent that at all. I mean, I didn't know. I don't even know what page it's
Oh,
on.
it's on 79. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this was a very different kind of poem for me. And I think probably your audience knows what an obad is by now. Okay.
Yeah, well, I just don't know how to pronounce it because I never know. But besides for that, yeah.
Obad in late September. You are not in my bed, where the sheets are calm this morning and green. All night the fleeing moon lit particles of dust. I touch the pillow where your head should be. You never left. How could you leave? You've not yet come, the man I have not met. All night the fleeing moon, this morning too much green, the sheets too calm, and you not in my bed.
Yeah, another beautiful poem that was Abad in late September. And it's funny, the reason why I can't know, we have a poem we published once called Abade or Abad for One Dismayed. And I assume that's supposed to be a rhyme. And so I've always I can never remember which one's which. But that's a beautiful poem too. We were talking about how how beneficial meditating on poetry is. There's a distinction sort of, or a line maybe, between like writing for yourself, because having that exercise where you're sitting down, you're exploring your own thoughts, your own memories, bringing people back, and reconciling and coming to terms with disconnected thoughts within your mind, and feelings that you haven't put to words yet. How much are you writing for yourself, and how much are you writing for a future reader? And is there a certain point that the future reader comes in? Is it mostly for yourself, and then the chips fall where they may? How do you approach that different directions you can be looking?
Well, I don't expect every time I sit down to write, I don't expect to be successful at even getting a poem. So do I think about who's going to hear it, and am I writing for them or am I writing for me? I think I'm just loving the practice of trying to write poems. At this point, it's habitual, but the kind of habitual, like a cup of coffee, is habitual. I like the way it feels. So I'm not really thinking about an audience for quite a while. I keep two little file cards on my desk, just on the wall, really. It's facing me. One of them says, "It's about the language, stupid." And this is based on the James Carville. It's about the economy, stupid, when he was running the campaign for the future president, Clinton. And so I try to make my writing practice about the language. But then when a poem feels like it's something worth working on, so I'm working on it. My other card says, "It's about the reader, stupid." That what I say had better be clear, had better not be confusing. So in that sense, I do think about where the poem is going, but not until I've gotten to the point where I think it's worth my time to do a revision.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, and how to do it that way. Well, we have two poems left. Before we read the penultimate poem, I should say, if anybody has any questions for Andrea, leave them in the chat window now. Make sure you put question in bold so I can see it. That helps either on Facebook or YouTube. I'll pass anything along to talk about a little bit more. And also, if you're enjoying what you're listening to and watching, please do click the like button, no matter where you're watching this, live, after the fact, anywhere. right now is the time. If you haven't done it yet, it really helps poetry spread around. And if you're on Facebook, I should say too, their other buttons are much better than like one heart is worth 3 likes or something. This is the world we live in. But if don't just click like click laugh or click the heart or the care or whatever, that actually helps. And if you're on iTunes or Spotify or whatever, leave a review because that counts more. And this is all free and wonderful, but we don't have to. We have to share it. So share it if you will. Okay. Well, let's read the second to last poem you've got for us, Andrea.
Okay. And this one is also a poem that the title will enjam into the first line of the poem. How rare, when I lived in the woods, to stand at a window. Instead, I went out into the stillness that's anything but still. Each morning on the path I kept raked all year, I walked through pin oaks and pines, steadfast junipers, the occasional wild dogwood and aromatic sassafras. So much to learn in those woods without using my mind, without language to ladder up or rope down. I breathed with my body instead of letting my brain take all the oxygen. I tried to let the trees watch me, tried to let language fall away, dismissed word after word as if to mimic the trees, as if I too were a tree doing what I must, as if each thought were green with chlorophyll, and I could hold on to it only by letting go, each word a leaf that first yellowed, then dropped onto the path until the woods became part of me, the words then underfoot and bright before they darkened.
Yeah, that's a wonderful poem too. I love that line, without language to ladder up or rope down. I love that concept because that is so much of what we do. That was How Rare When I Lived in the Woods by Andrea Hollander from her most recent book, And Now Nowhere But Here. So you're very personal in these poems. I mean, all the poems about your family, your father, your mother's death. That poem "Sand" is extremely personal. Do you worry about that in any way? About putting yourself out in these intimate ways that the poems are doing? Your deepest thoughts and feelings are on display. Is that something that you worry about at all?
I'm 77 years old, and no, I do not worry about it. I did worry about it when I was 23 and first started writing or trying to write poems, worried about what other people would think. It's not that I don't think about what other people will think, but I think at my age, I don't know how many more poems are in me, whether I'll ever have another book. You start to think about your death a lot more when you're in your 7th decade. And so I think for me, for this book, and really probably for all my books, but more now than ever, I want to be as honest as I can, because if I'm not, then what's the point in terms of any activity? For me, I love reading poetry. I love teaching other people how to be in love with it more than they are maybe at the time. Or I just don't have anything I want to hide anymore. And it's not that every poem I write I think should be published. That's not it. But who am I hiding from if I'm sitting in a room by myself?
Mm-hmm.
I want to find out what is buried. Have I buried something that deserves to be brought up and given air and breath?
Mm-hmm.
I don't.
Do you recommend having that sort of not caring personality? Like, do you think that that if you can find that earlier, you're better off? Do you know what I mean?
Well, yes, I do think you're better off on one hand. On the other hand, I'm also in love with traditional forms. I'm not sure that I've written enough good poems that are in given forms like sonnets, etc. But now, why did I bring that up? I'm not even sure why I brought that up, except that it helps to enclose emotion. I remember reading Maxine Cuman had said that whenever she has something very emotional that she's knows she's going to write about, she decides she's going to put it in a traditional form of some kind.
Mm.
So maybe that's part of my background, but maybe that's why I haven't written many of those poems successfully, because something keeps pushing those, I guess you could say, the scaffolding down, the scaffolding that is those formal constitute form.
Hmm.
I kind of let the form find me rather than me finding it.
Yeah, yeah. Zoe Turin wanted to know any other advice for teaching yourself how to write poetry. What you've talked about already has been really helpful, and I think that Trigger Town is a wonderful book by Hugo, and I definitely would recommend that. Any other advice that you have for somebody who's sort of starting out but learning themselves and not going through the MFA route and all that?
Yeah, Ted Kuzer's book that came out more recently than Richard Hugo's. I think it's called The Poetry Home Repair Manual.
Hmm.
And the subtitle is maybe something like a guide for beginning poets or something like that. Well,
Hmm.
damn it. It's not just for beginning poets, it's for all of us. And it has to do with simple ways of approaching the craft part of the art of poetry. So I think for someone who's just trying to find his or her way, I think it's a very good guide. And for the most part, both, well, not for the most part, completely, both of these writers, these poets, Richard Hugo and Ted Kuzer, have a great sense of humor as well as good advice. So
Hmm.
those are books that I think are good. And then just trying to sometimes I would pick up a poem. I mean, or I've been opening a book to a poem, and I pretend that that poem by somebody else is a question, and that my poem has to answer that
Hmm.
question.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm going to follow the person's form um, as well as the subject matter, and that's kind of fun. I remember doing an exercise for myself. There's a poem by Donald Justice called Men at 40. And thought, oh, I'm almost 50. I'm going to write a poem called Women at 50. And I
Hmm.
did. But I followed his form. I think there were quatrains. But what I also did is I took one noun from each of his quatrains, and I my assignment for myself was I had to use that noun in a completely different way in each of mine.
Hmm.
And so it's sort of a little secret that anybody who wants to do something like that, and it distracted me from my usual way of writing.
Hmm.
And it was a good distraction. It had to do with form, and it had to do with responding to someone else's point of view, and was fun.
Yeah. One of the things we get about, out of creative writing programs or, or undergraduate programs is a community, and a direction to go, how to meet people, how to know about like submitting poems, publishing poems, books, making contacts. Is there a way that you managed to do that, without those traditional resources? Is there any advice on that respect? The sort of the career aspect of being a poet outside of just writing the poems, which you can do just reading a lot of poetry, reading good books on how to write poems, which there's so many. I mean, I have the finger exercises for poets from Dorian Lux right here next to me, which we had her on last month. There's so many books you can read, but meeting people and being a part of a community is something that's really important too if you're going to spread your poetry anywhere. Do you have any advice on that?
Boy, I am not the right person for the answer of that, because I did not meet another poet till I was 43 years old.
Oh, wow.
Um, I've been writing since I was 23, and
Hmm.
then I applied for a scholarship to Breadloaf, and I won it and went, and there were 350 writers there, and no, everybody was a writer, and it was just shocking and a wonderful shocking.
Hmm.
So I didn't have a community, but once I went to Breadloaf, I suddenly did have a community. When I was in my late 20s, I I met my husband. We got married. He always wanted to build his own house, and we went to the Ozarks and we built our own house. And I gave birth to my one and only child and raised him there in the woods. And that last poem I read really is what it was like living in the woods.
Hmm.
But I didn't have anybody else in that community, uh, Stone County, Arkansas, that I knew was a poet. I mean, there maybe have been poets, but I didn't know them. So I didn't have a community, Tim. So
Hmm.
that was hard. And I didn't realize how lonely I was in terms of that part of my life. Um, on the other hand, my husband and my son were very good listeners, and they were my first readers. So,
Hmm.
and my son still is a good reader. And I'm not married to my husband anymore, so if he's reading any poems, he's reading them on his own.
Yeah. Well,
But
that's
in any
good. Hmm.
case, I once I did meet other writers, it really was a a big relief. It was I never felt lonely again.
Hmm.
I could write to them. But I did always have the poems of other people, even long dead people,
Hmm.
uh, from that first anthology that I told you about that was about what to read at a funeral.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think this whole conversation has been so inspiring for people who are, in that phase where they don't, they found Rattle as a community, of course, but but you can do it on your own. You can read and you can write great poems and meet other poets, and it's something that we can just do. You don't have to have all that. So it's a really great reminder to everybody
But I
listening.
want to say
Yeah.
something about you, Tim. I've watched some of your I forget what you call them, where you are your
Oh
critique.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, your critique sessions. I think there's a lot to be learned by watching you, in this particular case, look at a poem and talk about what is working and what is not quite as strong as it should be or as clear as it should be.
Hmm.
Uh, I like your attitude when you do that because
Oh,
you're
thanks.
always honoring the person. You're not, in any case, discrediting the person. You're giving honoring the poet, even if the poem doesn't seem to be the one you might have wanted to publish, for
Hmm.
example.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, there's just so much good that comes of poetry. Our mission at Rattle is to promote the practice of poetry, and I do feel like it's a. I mean, if you want to call it a spiritual practice, I do. I think it is. Like it's a secular spirit thing. It's uplifting on that level. That they're prayers that we're putting out, and on so many levels, it's so valuable to be doing, no matter what level you're at, because it makes you physically better. It makes you psychologically better. It brings you into a community, puts you in conversation with the writers of history. It puts your stamp on the world as someone who was here and saw it. I mean, it's just so valuable on every level. So we're happy to help any way we can think of to help. So thanks for saying that, though. I appreciate it because it's a lot of fun too doing those critiques. Let's close out. I've already held you over because of the technical glitches. Let's close out with one last poem.
okay, and I'll say one thing before then, and that is that um, I think I do have an audience in mind, and that is people who think that poetry is not for them.
Hmm.
I think that sharing poems, whether they're mine or somebody else's, um, there's something, as you were saying, it's a spiritual practice. It's also spiritual to listen to poems and be in touch with the inner something
Hmm.
of someone else. Okay. Again, this is a poem in which the title uh, is into the front line of the poem. Past my window toward the giant elm in front of my building. Then I heard the traffic slow before it stopped at the light. Ebb and flow, I thought. Ebb and flow. I take so much for granted, like calling this building mine, this street mine. I even think my elm, my crows. Now I hear pellets of hail hammering the lids of the trash bins in the alley, and I know why the crows were in such a hurry. They're harbingers. They know when to take cover, when to fly. Listening to the hail reminds me of my father, who taught me to imagine the worst outcome and prepare for it. If nothing bad happens, be happy. If something does, well, at least you know what to do. I tried living like that, and it ruined me. Never feeling, never fully savoring all the good I had, always expecting the good would end. I get up and stand at the window. The hail has softened into snow, each flake slow enough to be visible. So much to do, but I'm still here watching, as if nothing else matters. Each beautiful flake like a kept promise I don't believe would be kept. I didn't believe would be kept. Snow promises nothing, therefore nothing to expect, but nothing to fear either. Already it has begun to calm the afternoon. When it thickens, snow brings silence, its whiteness covering every mistake. Even the divorce now seems a small thing, layers of snow between me and that other me. Everything quiet, even there. I'm clean again. We're all clean. And I'm standing at my window on a suddenly wintry late November afternoon in silence, looking through it. So much snow, I hear only the tinnitus I've gotten used to, another kind of snow. Real snow is coming down faster now, the flakes smaller, and they're sticking. I've got that starting over feeling you get the night before school begins. And the cars are moving again, but very slowly. We're not used to driving in snow here. The tops of the cars are covered with wigs of snow, powdered wigs like courtroom barristers in British films. Car after car, they've got me smiling, giggling. I'm laughing out loud. I'm laughing the way the elm must be laughing, all those crows tickling its branches. Maybe the crows are laughing too. I can't see them through all this snow. Maybe they're wearing snow caps and epaulets of snow. Maybe they'll stay a while longer, my crows, huddled together in my tree. Ebb and flow, ebb and flow. This snow so beautiful, I have nowhere to go.
Yeah, and that's the last poem from the book, and a great way to end a book, too. That was Andrea Hollander's And Now Nowhere But Here. Andrea, thanks so much for being a guest today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I think we've learned a lot and got a lot of insight. So I really appreciate it, and wonderful poetry as well.
Thank you, Tim. It's been fun being here.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So once again, that was Andrea Hollander. You can find her on her website, all her books. There's 6 of them, I believe, at Andrea Hollander, just like it sounds, andreahollander.net. So find the books there. And there's a bunch of the books there that are also wonderful. So we're going to take a quick break now and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was, write a villanelle that mentions your favorite season. Make each refrain slightly different. And now, as a reminder, it's a one-page max. So to share a one-page max, if you'd like, email it right now to promptlines@rattle.com. That's promptlines@rattle.com. Then find the Zoom link in the chat windows on YouTube or Facebook. I'm going to post it there momentarily. But if you would like to just enjoy it, if you don't have a poem to share, sit right where you are, because the best place to watch is YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, because then you can see the poems too, as everybody's reading them. So either way, we'll be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. We've got our prompt poems editor here, and it's hard to set this up.
We just moved it 8 times.
I know. Okay,
Okay.
That's better.
Ninth time the charm.
Ninth time's the charm. Well, we have our prompt poems editor, Katie Dozier, here.
Hello.
And the prompt for this week was to write a villanelle that mentions your favorite season and make each frame slightly different. So, how did you tackle your own prompt this time? And thanks for giving us really formal prompts twice in a row. I'm busy.
Says the guy who's asking for more formal poetry all
That's
the
true.
time. You are. Be careful what you wish for.
That's true.
I thought it was really fun to write a villanelle, and I do think, having the prompt it's kind of nice to be pushed into something that is frankly a little bit more work, I think is fair to say. But I enjoyed the experience. I hope that the others did. it was kind of a bad week for us personally to pick a villanelle.
Yeah.
Like, that's fair.
Yeah, lots going on this week.
A lot of kids downstairs.
But we did it. Yeah, there are a lot of kids down there.
Yeah.
We have a whole army. And they're all together.
We felt so scary.
We have to take over the world with poetry and bracelets.
They're putting together Legos downstairs. All right.
Okay.
So,
are you ready for your poem? Or do you want to explain why you wanted to make each refrain slightly different?
Sure. So I kind of think that's the secret to writing a great villanelle. So I think that it's very likely a lot of people have reread my favorite villanelle of all time, Elizabeth Bishop's One Art. And that's really what makes it stand out, right? And then different syntax is really important. Otherwise, it doesn't feel like it builds, and it needs to feel like it builds. And I don't think my villanelle is perfect, but I definitely did vary the refrain. I think kind of forgot that I had slightly in that prompt. So here we go.
Okay.
I varied it, though. It's fair
Okay.
to say. I'm going to read it from my phone. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Why I had a no glitter rule. My daughter poured a rainbow tube of it over her head. True story. Okay.
Can confirm.
So, I can confirm, yeah. Set free, the sparkles didn't settle. Remember how they rained down. Glitter snuck in between the floorboards, so much unsaid, by the boy that laughed at my broken wing poems. The dread of sharing with the spider that stole, who webbed what he found. Way back then, I just stuck a rainbow tube over my head, pretended there was no such thing as cobwebs, as if threads could sew any two people together. But poems compound. The glitter danced on the disco floor, upside down. I read Stag's Leap and found it hard to sleep. That book's red cover twinkled with green glitter stars from the ground. When did I pour it? I was stuck. No rainbows overhead. First comes reading, then comes writing. So I spread my notebooks all over the house, began to hear the sound of glitter slicing up the floorboards. Poems shred. I was a shingle on the roof in a fall storm, so I fled amidst the sirens of tornado warnings. Unbound, I soon found a rainbow to jump inside my head. And about all that glitter, in the end, we were wed.
I love the ending too. The thing about the form is that the endings really feel like great when it has some kind of, because of the rhyme in the refrain running through, it feels inevitable once you get there, which is a wonderful feeling for a poem.
Yeah, it definitely sets you up to have that complete feeling as really, so much of that I think is the rhyme even more than the refrain, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I have this poem here. Now, what I like to do, so I always had this sort of goal to write one of those sort of classic kind of poems that is like simple and like quotable, and so I tried. So I tried to channel like my Rexroth or something.
Okay.
With this poem, because I thought it might be an opportunity for that. So this is Villanelle Too Late. Here we go, Villanelle Too Late. The current day would never please him. In spring, he loved the summer. In summer, it was fall. Tomorrow was his favorite season. As if the weatherman committed treason, he'd grumble from his chair. The heat, the cold, the gall. The current air would never please him. It's better in the Caribbean, he'd say. Learn French, we'll move more north to Montreal. Tomorrow, like it was a season that could ever come, a reason to chase, the way a bounding dog might chase a ball. The current, though, could never please him. We'd try to find a way to ease him from his moods. We'd call until we didn't call. But sorrow was his favorite season. He'd always find another reason to slam a door, to kick drum down the hall. The truth is, we could never please him. Tomorrow was his favorite season. That is my villanelle, Too Late.
Wow, I think that's really great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And I think you definitely varied the refrain because
No, I
you were a
did.
little concerned. You were, and I was like, Tim came downstairs. He's like, I didn't really vary the refrain. I was like, that's the prompt.
Well, I think, honestly, I think I was going to not, because there's a thing about when it doesn't vary and you manage to make it build. It's like a sort of difficult challenge. And I didn't, and I revised it a little bit to vary. I think it made the poem better, actually.
I think, I don't know. I always think it could, like, even in really strong villanelles, which is possible, I still think, like, it feels more impactful because it's just showing what language can do, right? It can twist and move when it needs to.
It's true. Yeah,
So,
that is true. And I had a rule, though, they can only change one word per each.
I did not
refrain
have that
change.
rule. I did not have that rule.
So anyway, those are our poems for today. Let's see what everybody else had. And let's go first to, of course, Dick Westheimer, who has the fastest internet connection, the fastest draw east of the Mississippi. Hey.
And out here in the boonies of Southwest Ohio, we got fiber optic. What can I say?
Well, that's pretty good. Well, it's great to see you, Dick. Thanks for being here. How was the Villanelle for you?
It was fine. I will say that it was, the way that I knew that it worked was that I was surprised with what happened, especially in the quatrain. I kind of had a sense of the flow of what was going to happen in the first five tercets, and then when the quatrain came, it just came as a surprise to me.
Well, that sounds like a very compelling start, and like we're going to be hearing a good poem, I have to say.
I hope so. I hope so. It's called Unsettled Seasons High Bunish Villanelle because
High
it
Bunish
has.
Villanelle. Oh my, you're trying to please the editors here.
It's already
Well,
working.
there just seemed to be something that needed. I did want to say one thing about some of the comments in the interview is that, this notion of how do you learn to write poetry? How about listen to a couple hundred Rattlecasts?
Well,
I'm
good for
serious.
you,
You know
Dick.
that.
Did it for me too.
Yeah, that participating in listening, being part of, not giving up on them ever, has been really important to hear lots of poems read and lots of poems read by poets in different voices has been really important for my poetry.
Yeah.
Well, I totally agree. I definitely agree. And the critique of the week, like there's so much out there, and I mean, I don't think there's not a shortcut, right? But you can really fast track it. Right?
Yeah,
That's true.
well, there's no book,
Everything that's out there.
it's just keep talking poems and poetics and reading and listening. So you can tell me, Tim, when this is done, the answer to your question, how writing the Villanelle was for me.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
I will
Dick.
say,
Yeah.
I will say that thank you, Katie, for you reading one where you varied more than slightly each line because
My quotes are escaped. Those are my quotes. Yeah. Yeah.
good. Unsettled Seasons High Bunish Villanelle. The season I love best's the planting one, when seeds are sown to harvest at the next, when dying things become what's just begun. It's autumn's berries drupal black and sowing garlic where peppers were just guests. I love this season. Its planting's almost done. I'll order seeds these coming winter months, pies from pumpkins in the cellar, the best. The wood stove's fire's dying's just begun. It's spring, it's spring, it's spring. At last you've come. These sprouting seedlings, greening time expects planting, weeding, loving season's sun. Tomato, melon, sweet corn, basil, lust. Summer's bounty is the main event when living things become what's just begun. Time's a river on a wheel, and what I once knew is largely gone, except the season I love best's the planting one, when dying things become what's just begun. The gardener grows in the garden compost.
It's a great haiku.
Yeah, that really is.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
And on top of a good villanelle, I mean, the villanelle,
yeah.
it all worked up to that ending. You know,
Yeah.
the season I love best, the planting one, when dying things
Yeah.
become what's just
I like
begun.
the subtle villanelle. I mean, it's not just subtle with villanelle in the title. It's true. But
I think
otherwise-
one of the things that was key to me was to try to make sure I got at least the rhythm part of it, which made the extreme variance in the refrains feel a little bit less jarring.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. Thanks
That's
so much.
wonderful. Also, a good opportunity to remind everybody about the Hyben Tribute section call, which ends on October 15th, right?
2 days from now.
2 days from now.
Oh,
So-
better get writing.
You can do that. And also, if you want to, beyond just the Rattle Hyben tribute, if you want to submit to, I know because we talked to Roberta Beery and Blue Watts, the two editors of Frog Pond and Modern Haiku, that they love other forms and other things
Yeah.
coming in. Like they're kind of tired of just prose with a block and then a haiku.
Yeah.
They want like lots of haiku within it and then weird, well, I shouldn't say weird, but having a villanelle with a haiku. They are looking for things like
Yeah,
that too.
I think
so.
it's really exciting to push
Yeah.
all forms and all boundaries, definitely. So, yeah.
Well, thanks. Good example of that, Dick. Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the prompt. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So it was Dick Westheimer with Unsettled Seasons Hibanish Villanelle.
Oh, and also on that vein, I just want to say that with the poetry space, we have for anybody that's like polishing a Hyben, because I'm like obsessed with everybody submitting this. We did an episode on haiku. So if that's the part of your Hyben that's unfinished and you're kind of doing it, there's a new episode of the poetry space on haiku.
There is true. Yeah, it's true. And the haiku is so important. And
Yeah,
like we
it
talked about
really
in
is.
space,
It really is. Yeah.
You know, going somewhere different with that haiku, like there's a cut within the Hyben,
Yeah.
you know? So it's like you want a haiku, have a cut, like something changes, some different perspective happens. And then you want that to happen with the Hyben,
And the
between
title.
haiku and the title.
And the
yeah.
title. Yeah.
So it's a sort of nexus of leaps.
Yes.
You know, it's like you jump to this level and then to this level and then it's a
And
whole...
that's why I'm so excited. I
There you
like
go.
roller coasters and
Yeah.
exciting things.
Well, anyway, that's a lot of talking about.
That's
that.
a lot
Let's
of
go.
talk. Sorry.
And also, we're still trying to go to this concert later. So we
Oh,
gotta-
actually, the kids don't want to go.
Oh, they don't? Okay,
No,
well, that's
okay.
good to know. I'm glad I got that piece. Okay, so let's go to Christiana Doucette next.
Hi, is this
Hi.
working all right?
It is, yeah. Great to see you. Yeah.
Good to see you too. I'm back home, but
Excellent.
we
Yeah,
still
it's
don't
great
have
to know.
internet, so I've rigged
Mm.
my phone to be the hotspot. That's why I wasn't sure if it was gonna.
It is
how it was
amazing that
gonna
it works
work
that
with
well.
Zoom.
Actually,
Yeah, we
hotspotting
wouldn't
from a
even know.
phone.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
I'm relieved because it would not be fun to have no internet still.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to have you here and glad you're back home too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
So-
so how is your villanelle? How is it tackling that?
Hurricane is still on my mind, right?
Mhm.
Because there's still a lot of cleanup happening.
Mhm.
And this one, so that's what the villanelle kind of focuses on. It probably focuses on more when we didn't yet have power, which was, right before I left. But I
Mhm.
just had been mulling over that over and over and how we respond in these situations.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting. Just about anyone that you talk to, they're like, no matter what has happened to their house or anything else, their job, anything at all that you can think of, the response is, we're okay, we're alive, we're doing all right.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
that's just the automatic response. And so
Yeah.
this
Mhm.
villanelle kind of explores that response.
Yeah, that's a
Okay.
great thing to notice. Yeah.
Mhm.
Affirmations of the powerless, a villanelle. We are okay. We are alive. The streets are full of trees and wires. We have a house we sleep inside. The autumn trees that still survive drop leaves instead of limbs. Mud's mires dry okay. We are alive. Without power, we contrive hot meals, pizza baked right on the fire. We have a yard. We eat outside. I wonder on the morning drive which houses still have occupiers, which are okay, which still hold lives. At GSP, when I arrive, a Lake Lure guard justifies, I have a house to sleep inside. My neighbors don't, she confides. We repeat our mollifiers. We are okay. We are alive. We have a house to live inside.
Oh, that's beautiful. And
Very
I just,
nice.
anytime I love hearing people read, informal rhyming poetry in a regular voice. It's like my favorite thing.
Yeah, it sounds so nice.
Yeah, it does. Beautiful sounds. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. And a great thing, like I said, to notice too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Christiana. That was Christiana Doucette with Affirmations of the Powerless, the Villanelle. And if you didn't watch last week's episode, Christiana was, in South Carolina for Hurricane Helene in a difficult time. That's why the power was out we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, thanks for sharing that, Christiana. Let's go to Nivedita next, because she's probably on her break. Hey, Nivi, how are you doing today?
Hey, Tim. I'm doing great, thank you. How about you?
Hi.
I'm great. It's always great to see you.
Hi.
Hope both of you are keeping well.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you tackle this prompt?
This is, I know, for some reason, this has always been one of the more difficult forms for me to write. So it took me about 3 tries. I don't think I'm still where I am with it, to be honest, and I still want to work on it, but this is where it is now. So I chose spring.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Because I think it's a season we don't see in India, so it's always sort of fascinated me.
Oh, that's really interesting. And I kind of forgot that aspect of the prompt, that it's favorite season. Totally forgot.
Yeah, I know. I knew we were going to get a lot of fall. And honestly, Nivi, I have to confess too, I forgot about the season part and then I slipped fall in because it was very much set in fall. It had like cobwebs and, but I was like, I'm breaking too many rules here. So spring's a great choice.
I think the reason I chose that is, like I said, we don't see it in India. We have summer, and we have something that goes even hotter, and then some places have winter.
All right, well, let's hear this one.
Spring's soft return. The first green shoots appear beneath the rain in dawns that kiss the earth with soft delight. Spring whispers promises of life again. The breeze hums low, a song we can't contain, as the sun climbs high, reclaiming the sky's bright. The first green shoots appear after the rain. New buds bloom where winter has left its stain. The world exhales, finally returning to the light as spring whispers promises of life again. Soft petals fall upon the waking plain as each moment stretches towards the endless night. The new green shoots grow after the rain. A warmer wind will soon dissolve the pain, and all that slumbered will start their joyful flight with spring's whispered promises of life again. As the earth renews, the heart learns to sustain, live, and thrive before darkness falls. Till then, the first green shoots dance under the rain with spring's whispered promises of life again.
Oh, that's beautiful too. I love that.
Yeah, it really makes me wish we were in spring. And I feel like I really want that. Those are such good things. I want them.
It also kind of feels like there's no spring here in Texas.
It's fair. In the Houston area, we're not known for our mild weather.
Yeah, it's sort of like summer, winter for a day.
Yeah, the one day.
Yeah, and it's like hotter, hottest, and then maybe a cold if you're lucky.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Nivi. Always such a pleasure.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Tim and Katie. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks. Yeah, it was Nivedita Karthik with Spring's Soft Return. Next, let's go to Claudia Gary, who I think Claudia's been on like once or twice before. Great formalist poet. Been in Rattle before. Hey, Claudia.
Hi. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, this is fun. I've enjoyed this. I decided to write a villanelle haiku hybrid. So it's a villanelle with haiku stanzas.
Oh.
I was hoping each one would kind of qualify as a haiku, but there is the rhyme. And there is, I put punctuation in because it's a villanelle. But anyway.
So this really is interesting take, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So this is called A Falling Out. And it is about fall, even though it starts with summer. So a falling out. Summer's forest thinned, green and orange palaces flutter in cool wind. Autumn's sheath is pinned over flimsy trellises. Summer's forest thinned. Tall oak trunks are skinned. Acorns graze their calluses, falling in cool wind. Lightly disciplined by the year's analysis, summer's expanse thinned, birds cannot rescind their departing malices, struggling in the wind. Spring and autumn, twinned opposites, flash jealousies, leave each summer thinned, waving in the wind.
Oh, love that last stanza too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And really neat to do the haiku stanzas in the
Yeah,
villanelle.
that really is. Wow. I like everybody's being so creative, and this was really neat.
Yeah, I love it. But by the way, I didn't mention that in mine, I was inspired a little bit by the haiku stanzas because the meter is 4/6/4.
Oh.
So I thought I like the look of it when it's like a little extra.
Yeah, I
in
hated
middle
the way
line.
mine looked tonight. Was one of my many issues with it, but that's okay. We write the poems, we put them out there.
Me too. Well, the haiku stanzas they look so nice on the page.
Yeah,
you know?
they do. It's very much. It's like a wave coming in and pulling in.
Well, that was great.
Yeah.
And hope you come back soon again,
Yeah.
Claudia. It's been nice to see you again. I think you were on like once, like 2 years ago, maybe, right?
Right, something like that.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see you again. Thanks for
Nice
being
to
here.
be here.
Thanks for
Thank
writing
you.
the prompt.
Yeah. So it was Claudia Gary with a falling out, a haiku villanelle. Let's go next to. Let's go to Siobhan Brownlee because it's late there in France where she is. Hey, Siobhan.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, great to see you.
Yep, good to see you too. So with this, I was firstly inspired by a poem that Chelsea McClellan shared with us a few weeks ago. It was a villanelle about marital problems. I kind of had that on the mind, that marital problems could be a potential subject. And then, but I knew we had to write about seasons as well. So I was thinking of my own situation where I've lived in both hemispheres. And I've got my close family in the southern hemisphere. I live in the northern hemisphere. So I'm always aware of the duality, that different seasons are going on at the same time. So the poem is called Villanelle of the Between. A tapestry lies creating a cover of sprite pink blossoms and russet leaves over dentured wife and rounded lover. At the same time, I perceive the color of two opposing hemispheres. A tapestry lies creating a cover, where warm and tepid flutter, where at once ice and fire weave over dentured wife and rounded lover. Dual memories of seasons buffer the strain of being in one, naive about the tapestry of lies creating a cover. Newborn chicks on the way to summer, along with autumn leaves whirling, deceive the dentured wife and rounded lover. A time will come when there is a shudder. Your voice will be forced to cleave the tapestry of lies about the other, spoken to indentured wife and grounded lover.
Yeah, very interesting. A direction that goes is sort of surprising. Even though you introduced it, so I knew, then I kind of forgot, and then came back there. Yeah, nice journey to take us on.
Sorry, it was a bit grim at the end.
No, definitely not. I mean, yeah, but talking, about in the way that Andrea did about so going somewhere and surprising yourself, kind of, it worked really well. And the villanelle is tricky to do because you sort of know where you're going.
Yeah.
Sort of at least what the last line is going to be.
Yeah,
almost.
but you have to have it mean something different by the time you arrive there. Yeah, so it's interesting.
Yeah, well, very cool. Thanks so much for sharing that, Siobhan. And
thanks
too,
very
from
much.
France, where the villanelle comes from. So a little bit of.
Where it's also known as a villainesque.
Oh.
Well, so it said on Wikipedia. I've never heard anyone call it a villainesque besides me.
Interesting. Okay.
So I don't know. It's fun.
Fact stored up there in the old brain.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, Siobhan. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's Siobhan Brownlee with a villanelle of the Between. Okay. Next, let's go to Rod Deasy.
Hello, good evening.
Hey,
Hi.
Rod. Yeah, always good to see you.
How are you, Tim and Katie? I hope you're well.
Yeah, we
Doing
are.
great.
Yeah.
And I see you are in the same state.
We are back.
We are.
Yeah, things seem a little bit more right.
And Rod, I have to give a compliment to you. My daughter was watching the prompt lines last week with me, I think, and she loved your hat. So she wanted you to know that your hat's, and it's amazing. I mean, she's right, obviously. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Rod's got style.
I know. I love it. It's exciting. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good. Thank you. Thank her for me.
I will.
Okay. The first thing I do when I write a villanelle, which I did earlier on today because I had forgotten to do it earlier in the week, because I had my beat poetry show this week. which was talking about communicating to a lot of people, where I read poems with a backing band of piano, bass, and drums.
How nice.
Let me stop you just for 1 second, Rod, and ask you how does that work? Do you who like follows who? Because I have a friend who has a blues society, and he's always trying to get me to do that, and I don't even know how we'd start. Like, do you like how does that work?
I write the poem and I put arrangements in it.
Oh, okay. So
wow. So Rod does a lot. That's how it works.
Okay. Well, that's not actionable.
And I then work out with the drummer what various beat parts should be.
Cool. I would love to see that.
Reading sections aloud to him. And we did a good show this time. Normally, our friend Claudia Gary opens for me, but she was sick this year, so she wasn't able to come.
Oh, really?
However, she was able to do the normal function that she does when I write a villanelle, which is to set me straight on it. So as soon as I've written a villanelle, before I do anything else, I send it to Claudia, because she actually teaches classes on the villanelle at the Writers' Center.
Yeah, and then you got me, and then gave me the idea of writing one. Thank you.
I encouraged you to come. Yeah.
That's great.
Without meaning to. So the reason Claudia's here is because of me. Okay.
That's great hearing that.
That's a great story. I'm glad you asked. Yeah.
Anyway, this villanelle is first draft, with a few tweaks by Claudia, and it's called "Everything Changes, Especially the Weather." These days, our weather is causing confusion, with two mixed-in seasons, heat wave and freeze out. It changes so fast, we can't draw conclusions. Having 4 seasons is just an illusion. Yes, leaves keep falling and spring flowers bloom, but the weather is crazy, full of confusion. It's pouring down rain. We put rubber boots on. Then it's suddenly 90 and scorching hot. It changes so fast, we can't draw conclusions. In old midwinter, when plants want to snooze on, along comes a hot spell and buds start to sprout. Nature gets hurt by this weather confusion. In May, enjoying spring's flower profusion, we get a snowstorm, an icy white blanket. With changes this fast, can we draw conclusions? Favorite season? Don't think I can choose one. Each day's an adventure, you'd better look out. And forecasts are simple, simply spreading confusion. Nothing will last. That's my conclusion.
That's a great change of the last line. Yeah. That's really satisfying.
Yeah, it really is. I love the rhymes too that they fit in there, Rod.
Really nice.
That's the fun part about foreign poetry is when you get like boots on and snooze on.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, very fun.
Thanks, Rod.
Thanks, Rod. Yeah. There was
and my friend Laura Berg is here as well tonight. So.
Well, you're doing great, Rod. You're going to take over.
Yeah. Laura got Rod here. And,
wow.
It's a little
wow, this is like a poetry chain. I love it.
Oh, that's it. Let's go to Laura next.
Yeah, let's continue on the train.
Okay. Well, hey, Laura. How you doing tonight?
Hi.
Okay. Well, I did make a brave effort, but I did not get finish line. I have just 2 lines of the last quatrain. I haven't been able to work out on my new villanelle yet. Mm-hmm. So I sent over one that is about 3-4 weeks old. It's not a new one.
So somehow though you knew that this prompt was coming.
Right.
How did that happen?
Yeah, because it's about autumn. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. And the other disclaimer I have to make is that I have these couple of poems about my husband that will make everybody think that, he's gone mad or something, but he's really very fine. So I hope that I must, I'll write a love poem next.
Okay.
It's coming. Okay.
That's a great comment.
I like that you'll remember that comment.
Okay. Here comes this one. Autumn crop lost to starlings. These flocking starlings appear as harbingers of imbalance, wounding all the soft fruits. I am worried about my husband's well-being. Glossed feathers like topaz tricked out fingers flex and flap toward the eye, up dusting motes. These flocking starlings appear as harbingers of such loss, each endearing capacity eroding, clawed, pecked, past selves ever more remote, that I worry about my husband's well-being. Yet aren't they also splendid, these ringers in of a late season, who mimic chortle whoop in flocks? Starlings that appear as harbingers, give back my tree. I clap, shoo them, wanting reversion, a still life. May change be eluded. I am worried about my husband's well-being and surely my own. Birds of elsewhere, loosing havoc in our trees, upend our fragile habitat. As flocking starlings appear to be harbingers, I spiral in worries about my man's well-being.
Oh yeah, wonderful. The refrain there is really strong. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much
Thanks,
for sharing that,
Laura.
Laura. Yeah, and for bringing so many people to the show.
You're
too.
doing great. I would follow you anywhere too, Laura. I can relate.
Same.
Aw. Well, thanks,
Thank
Laura.
you.
Yeah. There's Laura Berg with Autumn Crop Lost to Starlings.
Writing the prompt before the prompt.
Yeah, somehow.
That's how good she is.
Yeah. All right, Nancy Tunnell is next up.
Hi there.
Hey, Nancy.
Hey, Nancy.
I remember about a year ago that this was not long after I started doing the Rattlecast. We had a prompt to write a villanelle for Halloween that involved a cryptid.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I
did
thought,
the
oh, another
Hellhounds of-
villanelle. This will be fun. I wrote about 3 or 4 of them last year. And then it wasn't so much fun. I struggled a little bit. And what happened is, and this is, the title is The Season of Obsession, but I happened to read a memoir essay by a man who was talking about his father, reestablishing a relationship with his father. They had been estranged, and he began to realize that his dad was obsessed with being outraged due to politics and everything else in the world. And I could not let go of that. And so that phrase, obsessed with outrage, just stuck with me. So that's sort of my refrain. So I apologize. People wrote all these lovely seasonal references, and mine is a different kind of season.
Well, it's great to have a mix.
Yeah.
I think, especially for the political season.
Yeah.
I thought about writing about that too, actually. Politics but it's probably my least favorite.
I'm kind of glad you did.
Yeah. The season of obsession. Why did we plant bitter seeds? I regret the day. The anger growing from them has infested all we know. Now we are obsessed with outrage. The taste of conspiracy may gratify, but its aftertaste doesn't fade. It flavors speech in its spiteful flow. Oh, they were bitter seeds. I regret that day. Anger, like a blight on trees along the way, overtakes reason, allows ignorance to grow. We seem to take delight in our obsession with outrage. Rather than civility, outrage is displayed beyond the wild speeches from politicos. We chose these bitter seeds, I am ashamed to say. We seem to accept whatever the liars say, not in agreement when we know it isn't so, because we get caught up in their outrage. They dare to mix politics with theology, keep us confused on which way to go. Why did we plant bitter seeds? I regret the day they blossomed into an obsession with outrage.
Yeah. Well, really important poem, because that is the age of performative outrage.
Yeah,
everywhere.
definitely. And I do love the creativity on the take of the season, Nancy. It's really clever.
At first, I just called it obsession, and then I thought, oh, I'll call it the season of obsession.
You nailed it. You're telling us all your
Sneaking
secrets.
in there.
Well, thanks so much, Nancy.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Okay.
great.
Thank you.
The Season of Obsession by Nancy Tinnell. Let's go next to Hemet Malik.
Hello.
Hey, Hemet.
Hey. I love this. I love a villanelle. But I think I changed it a little bit more than slightly.
That's my
one.
camp. Yep.
Okay. Smoking ceremony. You call me arsonist, mad firefly. Our photos curl and crackle in the sink. Those years together burn, smoke thick with sighs. I watch the tendrils dance to cleanse the sky, which colours now in hues of rose and pink. Call me artist, my madness paints goodbye, in letters on this canvas nearly dry. Make no mistake, this is forever ink. The years are burned, the smoke has choked our sighs. The letters starburst into butterflies, and here's a toast to which we both can drink. From arson's match we made two fireflies, these children smelted from our mouths and eyes. Our love left bubbles as we watched it sink, but years have burst into 1,000 sighs. There's comfort as the seasons prophesize, the vow of fall to bloom again in spring. No arsonist, that madness burnt me dry. This smoke of years in flames to bless our sighs.
Yeah, I love that line. The years have burst into our thousands.
Yeah, I love. I was gonna say too. I love the letter starburst into butterflies. Like that is such a clear image to me. But what you're talking about is such an abstract thing to be able to make it like that clear to see the letters burning, doing exactly that. And I love the starburst as a verb. That's really brilliant.
Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Hemet.
Thank you.
Yeah, Hemet Malik with a smoking ceremony. I love too the variations of how much and how much change in the refrains.
Yeah.
You can sort of feel the difference and how what difference it makes by hearing a bunch of poems in a row.
Yeah, definitely.
Different amounts
like
of
him
it.
going from arsonist to artist, I think is so interesting.
Yeah.
So really cool.
Yeah. Right, well, thanks for sharing that.
Thanks.
Hemet. Yeah, let's go to Mike Bales next.
Oh, yeah, everyone was kind of hitting on an old theme of mine, poetry education. I'd tell everyone, Rattlecast, all the people I hear.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Mike.
I tell people that a lot of the Rattlecast featured people are the poets I follow, except there were a couple that I mentioned that I heard in readings here in the Quad Cities. My poem last week and this week are both in cemeteries, but life around. I kind of, when I wrote this and I thought of the other one, I thought I'm writing kind of yin and yang poems, kind of.
Yeah, that's
and opposites. The concept of opposites is always pretty important. This poem is Spring Breeze. A song lies in the soft wind as headstones rise from lustrous land. A time to reflect, a time to begin. A crown of trees shines with a touch of nature's hand. A song lies in the soft wind. Life's questions stir within. Through the hourglass, grains of sand, left with memories of friends. Soothsayers cry out the wages of sin, while a bird descends from the sky and lands. A time to reflect, a time to begin. Memories of what we've lost stir within. Life's schemes, small and grand, haunt our weary minds. A touch of sun warms the skin, a sense of joy as leaves dance. A song lies in the soft wind, a time to remember, time to begin.
Oh, nice. Again, I love listening to poems that are in form like that.
Yeah.
And you can hear all the refrains and the rhyming. It just makes it so, I don't know. I do wish people wrote more.
Especially from former Poets of the Month.
Yeah, that's true.
That was that. Oh yeah, I'll always remember that. That was on my bucket list, something like that. Yeah, I did a lot of this like 15, 20 years ago. So this is like a little bit of a refresher course.
Oh, very cool. Well,
Neat.
thanks, Mike, for sharing that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it was Mike Bales with Spring Breeze. Let's go next to Chelsea McClellan.
Hello.
Hi,
Hey, Chelsea, how are you?
I am doing good. It's good to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you. So, what do you got for us? How did you tackle this prompt?
I'm not sure how to answer how I tackled it. Line by line.
That's one way to do it. Maybe the only way.
So
sorry, we have the giggles now. This is dangerous. Chelsea and I are
so
dangerous. I'm sorry. It was my fault.
I'm just gonna read it.
Okay.
Good idea.
I'm so sorry. My poem's called How the Homestead Taught Me Rest. When all the vines are cut and cleaned away, the wood is dried and stacked above my head, the working's done, the rest begins today. Don't write unless it's something new, they say, but each novelty's a noose, a tighter thread. Once all the vines were cut and cleared away, each snowflake without glasses felt the same. Excitement melts as quickly as it's read. All writing's done. The real work is today to rest, observe the world in strings, betray my will for what is really there, depend on all the vines to be cut and cleared away from off of me when death is underway, to be a fruitful tree by autumn's end, when working's done. The feast begins that day. Before we gained this land and new decay, I didn't know that winter was our friend. Now all the vines are cut and cleaned away. The working's done. Our rest begins today.
Oh, yeah, wonderful music in that, Chelsea.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
great getting a lot of enjamment in, too, in the villanelle.
Yeah,
Which is a
it's
trick.
really nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
for sharing
you.
that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Great as always.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. That was Chelsea McClellan. Sorry. Well, we're going next to Chelsea McGlynn.
I know.
So,
we got the Chelsea segment of the show all lined up tonight.
But that was a Chelsea McClellan with How the Homestead Taught Me Rest. And now let's go to Chelsea McGlynn, who just happened to be next in line.
Yep.
Trying to get me to trip up, and you did. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, Chelsea. Oh, I think you're on mute. You're unmuted, but like your mic's not working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll come back to you, I think. Well, let's give it a second. Yeah, we'll come back.
Yeah.
Let's go instead to Megan McDonald. Oh. Let's see. There
Okay,
you are. Hey,
sorry.
Megan. Oh, it's no problem. Yeah.
So I almost read a different villanelle because I was in another group where we were supposed to do a half marathon, but halfway through I had to bag it. But one of the prompts was to write a villanelle. But it didn't have seasons and it didn't have much variation. So I said, okay, nope, can't get away with that. So that, and I forgot to put in the title, which I don't like anyway, but this year's fall in the DC area is going to be kind of meh because we didn't have much rain. So fading into fall. Leaves flow by, the sun sifts fall, the trees dance to tilt the sky. Each leaf is crisp and dry, color is faded and small flowing by. Gray clouds turns blue high above, the trees now beyond recall. They dance to tilt the sky. The wind is a murmur, a sigh. Winter is ready to install, cold flowing by. Fall has no reply, ice has it now in thrall. Leafless trees dance to tilt the sky. The freezing has come to ply, hear deep, long nights calls. Leaves flow by, the trees dance to tilt the sky.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. Again, that's another interesting interpretation of the form because we have the short lines in this one, which you don't usually see in a villanelle. So that makes a whole different music too. Thanks.
I was going to comment on that too, and it moves so fast too, and it's the shorter lines is really interesting.
Yeah. All this really kind of makes me want to write more villanelles because it's like
it sounds like you're warming to the prompt, everyone. That's good. After
a lot more ways you can play with it that I hadn't thought of. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Megan. There was Megan McDonald with Tilt the Sky. Let's see if Chelsea, are you good? We'll see. Let's see. No, we still can't.
Chelsea.
Oh, we'll try again. We'll try. Yeah, we'll try again in a little bit. It's like you're unmuted, but the no sound is coming from the mic.
Even though you're not muted on Zoom. Yeah.
The Zoom. It might be that your audio is like set to the wrong microphone or something like that. But okay. Well, we'll try to come back. All right. Tina Denniclaw is up next.
Hello.
Hi, Tina.
I have to organize myself just a little bit.
Oh,
Okay.
no problem.
Okay. Yeah, this one was really hard for me. I didn't even know what a villanelle was. It took me a couple of days to find a complete description because all the ones were kind of shorthand, like you already know what it is when you don't.
That is
it is true. There aren't many great descriptors out there. I totally agree, Tina. Yeah.
So I ended up putting the description up at the top and then writing my villanelle, and then at the end of the week I still had to go back and rearrange everything because oh no, I did that opposite. And there's a lot of rules, and the rule that I missed was this mentioning a season. So. Sorry about that.
It could be debris season.
I'm going to find a season in this poem.
We will.
Okay.
I'm on your side. Okay.
There actually is. If you pay attention.
No.
Actually, if I went back to look, is there anything? It's like, yeah, there is actually. But so in one of the things where I was trying to figure out what a villanelle was, it said that it's a good form to use about an obsession, which Nancy did. And they said from childhood. So I'm thinking, okay, so what from childhood? And there's a mystery that I'd had for decades that I didn't find the answer to until 3 years ago. And so I decided to write about that. So I'm going to cover about 300 years of family history in 14 lines. So it's a whole different, it's the opposite of the short lines poem.
Great.
And
let's hear it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be metered. That's not. Okay. So, I'm sorry. Okay, Debris is the name. I think he came from Indiana. My aunt unsure. She didn't know, you see. Grandfather James, family history never shared, and so uncertain told. A bit of nothing, family lore, dropped to the ground and left behind debris. James' father, Alexander, turned away from a century of Southern kin in Wythe County, years before the Civil War, set off to Indiana and mustered with the Union Corps. James never mentioned Alexander, and so my aunt, she didn't know, you see. His regiment chased General Hood to that famous tight escape across the Tennessee. War done, veterans pension, bought a Hoosier farm. He wed sweet Elsie, made a home. A bit of family romance dropped to the ground unnoticed and left behind debris. Sons part grown, Alexander ventured west to cut Nebraska sod, farm with Elsie and their children. They brought their Appalachian way of speaking with them. 4 generations later, Southern ties still plain. My aunt, she didn't know, you see. My grandma spoke that way. I heard her. And my aunt and cousin Connie in rural Colorado, where James moved his family, speech different from everyone. A bit of nothing, family lore, dropped and left behind so long ago, debris.
Yeah, I love the transfer. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, there's more.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we didn't scroll down. Sorry.
I have a quatrain now. I know it's long, sorry. No. Was it angry shun? Regret set too far back to speak that lost our family stories? Or was it accidental, not understanding how precious the telling. We would want to know. Her birth name came from Southern roots. Aunt Virginia never knew, you see. A bit of family lore unspoken, dropped and left behind debris.
Oh, yeah, that is nice. And I love the way, I was going to say, the debris. I love the way that transforms and moves in the poem. It's really nice.
And then it moves the best at the very end, too. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, she died about 10 years before I found the trail to find what the story was. I always wondered why my grandma and my aunt and my cousins sound like they were from the backwater. No one sounded like that in the family, but they very strongly did. And then my Uncle Bob, the youngest in the family, my dad's younger brother, Virginia's youngest brother, he was on his deathbed. And I had just found this information. And he was not really verbal. His mouth was too dry. But somehow, and I guess it's where the air is thin, I could really understand when he was communicating with me. But I told him this. He just marveled. But he learned before he was gone. So, we had no idea that more than 100 years before the Civil War, we had family.
Yeah, that is really interesting to find. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Thanks.
Thank you for letting me tell you.
Oh, definitely. Thanks. Yeah, our pleasure. Yeah, it was Debris by Tina Dennett Claw. And I knew I was going to do that at some point. Because the problem with
it takes up the whole and the way you have all the stuff over the,
Well, you pick up one line, you don't realize you're reading along with the wrong line. But anyway.
Okay. It's okay. You're the best, Tim. You're still the best.
You are the best, Tim. I
thanks,
agree
Tina.
with Tina.
Okay. Well, let's go to Chelsea McGlynn. I think she's switched computers, and now we should have her.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yay! We can now. Yay!
Hi!
Hi, my computer's old and apparently does not like to do anything anymore, but I'm on my phone.
Well, this works great, yeah. So let's see, pulling up your Villanelle. Deja vu again. Oh, it's like I've read this before.
Yeah, this is not the first one I wrote. The first one I wrote was very didactic, which I think is the problem with Villanelles. I was just writing over and over again.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So I was asking myself, what's something worth repeating? And that became one of the repeating lines. So here it is.
Okay.
Deja vu again. If in another life we would keep meeting, but as someone else's lover, would that be something worth repeating? To only see your back retreating into the arms of another? If in another life we would keep meeting before autumn becomes freezing, but I think you're just a bluffer, is that something worth repeating? The brief exchange of a greeting? What if we both discover that in this life we keep meeting, but our memories are deleting the way our lips would hover? We agree that's worth repeating. Promise me we'll keep seeking to recall a future with each other in every life as we keep meeting. We are something worth repeating.
Aww,
that is really nice.
That's really sweet. I love too. I love the use of questions in a villanelle to really propel it forward, and that's great there. I love the way you took this on. I'm beginning to really understand now that you've been coming to prompt lines for a while. Like the way you tackle the prompts is always really exciting to see. You always put some spin on it. Yeah.
My husband says it's because I never follow the rules.
Well, that's neat. And the repeating is the refrain that's repeating.
I know, and I love that take. That like makes the form like so effective. Like writing about the form itself makes it effective. It's so funny. I love it.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was Chelsea McGlynn with a Deja Vu again. Let's go next to Brian O'Sullivan.
Hello.
Hey, Brian.
Hi. Good to be here. So I did a couple, and one of them was a 575 Villanelle, but I'm not going to read that one. I posted it to the Facebook group, though.
Oh, no one. Cool. So haiku stanzas are reigning over
They are.
It's such a powerful prompt that it couldn't be contained to 1 week.
I like
that. It was fun to write, but there was so little room to get things in between the refrains and those short lines that I felt like it was kind of vague. So I'm going to read the other one instead. It's called Halloween Pilgrimage. Around the fire before the ghost walk, with a cup of cider in my hand, I wait to hear the dead who've come to talk to us temporal tourists. We're here on a loch, but I feel a cold excitement as I stand around the ghostly fire and wait to walk through the history of this strange park, this plantation, this once hellish plot of land. But do I want to hear the dead talk? I'm afraid this is all turning the darkest aspect of our history into trick-or-treating. And as we stand around the fire and hear an owl squawk and the old elms left in stark majesty by autumn's deadly culling hand, I'm more and more afraid to hear the talk of old days, and I very nearly balk, but ghost stories may make us understand the bad days, so we leave the fire and walk to hear the unencumbered dead talk.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, I love that the idea, that central metaphor, of history being like trick or treating.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's the candy?
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing
Thanks,
that, Brian.
Brian.
Yeah. Brian O'Sullivan with Halloween Pilgrimage. Yeah.
That makes me want to go on a ghost talk too. It's getting me Halloween vibes. I'm really starting to get them.
Well,
a ghost talk in the woodlands, Texas.
It's too bad we're not going to the New Orleans before
I want to go to
Halloween.
Savannah, Georgia for that. Oh, yeah.
Right. Well, next let's go to Lisa McDougald.
Hi,
Hey,
Lisa.
I know I'm a newbie, but I'm not new at writing poetry, but I'm new at this form. So
well, you're doing great. Like, you feel like a veteran already.
Yeah,
I'm not even
definitely.
making it up, but definitely
Thank
do.
you so much. I really enjoyed the challenge, even though I got really mad at it. Like the first night, I had to walk away, and I was like, nope. Because I wasn't even gonna continue writing, so I thought, okay, it's time to put it away and do something
Good
else.
idea. I like that.
Yeah. So here, I'll pull it up here. Okay, so on the title, just to let you know, since there's two hemispheres, one, this is pretty normal, and the other hemisphere, it's going to be not normal. So, October, summer. The seasons appearing unseasonal. I love the fall. It was my favorite. One day, I hope we will see it again. To dream of a cold day in October, a gray and boring day, a mild day, yet seasons appearing unseasonal. I bring my fall clothing out just in case the wind chills and the mosquitoes retreat. One day, I hope we will see fall again. To watch children play in the park without a mask or gaze at the temperature gauge. But seasons appearing unseasonal. Oh, how much I miss fall. My coffee cup warming my hands, watching the rain come down. One day, I hope we will have fall again. I promise I'll wear you, turtleneck, and you too, sweatshirt and sweater and flannel. The seasons appearing unseasonal. One day, I hope fall will return again.
That's great. Reminds me so much of moving to LA, and then there was this, because they only have 2 seasons in the valley there where I was living. It's like summer and then rain for a week, and then summer for 51 weeks. And it just eventually
we had
gets sick of it.
106. It was 106 on the 3rd in Santa Clarita Valley, which was kind of a first, and I guess 50 records were blown that day in this whole area. So it was ridiculous.
I made that promise to my sweaters too. I own too many sweaters for someone that lives in Texas. Like I just do, but I love them, and I promised. So I wore one today in 90-degree weather.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to go into one of those big ice box and just try on all your sweaters, and then they don't feel so bad.
I think that's a great plan. That's my. I'm going to start writing poems in the icebox.
Not a bad idea.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Thanks very
Megan.
much.
Or I mean, Lisa McDougall. Thanks so much, Lisa. That was Lisa McDougall with October Summer. And next, let's go to Zoe Turin.
Sorry.
Hey, Zoe, how you doing? Oh.
Hi, sorry, just lots of stuff going on in my house.
Yeah, well, we can relate. Great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be here. The villanelle was challenging. I did not know what a villanelle was. Now I hopefully do. But it was fun.
Yeah, that's great.
And I had a lot of fun playing around with the refrains. I probably changed them more than slightly, but it sounds like a lot of people did that. So I'm in good company.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it probably still needs a little work, but last sunflower season, the world is growing thick with wonder. Light condenses leaf by leaf till fields overflow, all green and gold despite the coming umber. Petals twist and aster bends encumbered, a finch astride to ride its earthbound bow. The seeds are growing thick with wonder. Its beak cracks shells like little thunder. The finch fears nothing of tomorrow. It preens its gold despite the coming umber. These sticky nectared days are numbered. Awareness tinges every drop with sorrow, though juices still drip thick with wonder. The trees will soon seem leaden lumber. The leaves will lose their borrowed glow, but green still holds despite the going under. Life will have her promised slumber, and death is always at your elbow. But now the world is rich in wonder. Let's glean its gold despite the coming umber.
Oh, yeah, very nice. Thanks so much for sharing that.
that's great.
And it's a great example, too, that death is always at your elbow. It's like a great line.
Yeah.
And, like, nobody would say it like that until the form, like, makes you think about different things in different ways, which is why form works really nice.
It's really hard to believe you went from not knowing what a villanelle was to that. That's very impressive.
Oh, thank you. I had fun with it.
Great.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks so much, Zoe, for sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. It was Zoe Turin with that last sunflower season. And let's see. Biswa Mishra is here.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Biz. Yeah.
Hey, Biz.
Great to see you. Thanks for your patience waiting.
I know, that's okay. I was taking my chances. I always love.
All right. So how did you tackle this form, Biz?
Yeah, I had to go and look because I remember we had written villanelle once.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like the other life. It's been so long.
It has. A year ago feels like a century ago.
Go and relearn the thing. And I mean, every form is fun to write, but I mean, they make it challenging, right? That's the fun part.
Yeah.
So I can tell you, it was tough to write, and I didn't write even a draft until yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And it still probably needs work. So, okay, let me get it.
Okay.
I don't know, where did I lose it? I did something.
Did the thoroughbred run away?
Uh-oh.
No, I don't know what I did with this.
And nobody understands my joke yet because I haven't seen the title of the poem
No,
yet.
we put it on screen.
Oh, you put it on... Okay. So everybody's like, what is she talking about? Sorry.
No, I'm just really sorry from here because I probably did something here on the phone and lost it. I mean, I don't want to screw up the screen, but it's here. I got on the phone.
Okay.
Thoroughbred. Every time I hear their song, the robins fill me with wonder, and I don't mind how long they have been going along. Now their babies wander and practice their own song on our neighbor's lawn, even when the sparrows banter fills the pine where they belong. Sparrows are guests too, not just a throng of noisy birds, because they augur music before the bees' buzzing song. Then comes my dear summer along, and out I go as a sprightly walker, hitting ponds and parks all day long. Soon it'll leave, but nothing is wrong. in what comes after and thereafter, I wish they would all come with a song, but without which I still will carry along.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, yeah. That a student will leave, but nothing's wrong. There's great lines come up when you're working the form.
Yeah, it's interesting without punctuation too. It works because I don't feel tripped up at all too.
Yeah, because I'm sure it needs a little bit of work, but the form, the repetition force something on you, right? So you have to make use with fewer lines available. So sometimes it works in a different way. So it limits you in a way that you don't become unnecessarily wordy.
Yeah, that's definitely
true. Well, right? As does haiku. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's one thing good about the forum.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, that's Bisharjit Mishra with Thoroughbred Villanelle.
Good night, Tim and Katie.
Yeah, good night, Biz. Let's see. So, and that will wrap it up for the show. Oh, wait, Ted Rivera. Yeah, let's do Ted's. So, as always, Ted Rivera includes an interesting picture. In this one, just from the thumbnail, I knew it was going to be interesting. I worry that Ted has dipped into the AI world, which might make...
I feel that this has, but I feel like if there's a good use of AI images, this is definitely it.
Yeah, this is definitely worth it. So this image, which I am sure is not real, is a cat who has stolen a very large fish, and he's running away like he just shoplifted it, but on 2 feet.
I want to believe it's real.
That would be that would be like the National Geographic photo of the year, even though it's in a fish market.
Yeah, it would. It would be great.
That would. Okay, we'll pretend.
I want to believe.
I want to believe they're real and they're out there.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see the poem. This is Villanelle by Ted Bernal Guevara. Curiosity is a life-resuscitating mechanism. It doesn't kill the unsuspecting feline. It's less straight-backed than catechism. Say if a man gets embolism and is left with only half his mind, does he waste his time on foggy idealism? Or does he take control and ditch naive realism? Tahiti he had always bucketed in kind. He would go there and discover Guggenism. Gogganism? Ted, you just make it so hard. It's going to get even worse. I can see it coming.
I was already thinking like, wow, I'm really glad I'm not the one reading.
Who's he kidding? He'd go there due to philogenism. Gauguin, love for the woman body is more aligned. It's your real want in the island's magnetism. But lately... there's been a pussy paganism in Tahiti, and cats are everywhere, even where you dine. You egress, but regret less your embolism. There must be hope in this sudden ritualism. Vacation must be populated by women, not feline. Life is too short now to get such negative tropism. So hunger this curiosity, this strange, lovely tourism.
Most unusual rhyme scheme of the night goes to Ted Rivera.
Yeah, those are interesting words you got there in the rhymes, Ted. That was fun to read, even if it was very difficult. And I didn't know what a bunch of those were either.
I don't know.
What is the Gauguin? That is like...
That's Paul Gauguin. I
think
it's I think it's right. And speaking of which, there's actually an exhibit coming to the Houston Museum, so I was going to ask you if you wanted to go.
I would love to go.
Yeah, so...
Oops, wrong camera. Let's see. But yeah, so yeah, I thought that was it. But this is one of the weird things where I know the name orally, but never how to spell it. So I wasn't sure if that's
think
what it was.
I might be mispronouncing it too. I just read.
No, I mean the other way around because I don't remember how like the look of it. I wasn't sure if that was the right. Anyway.
Well, hopefully Ted's laughing at us.
Well, thanks, Ted. It is always a pleasure, and love that picture too. All right, so let's go next to the Sciku. And the Sciku for this week is based on this article right here. And this is courtesy of, I'm trying to remember, I even remember this. Oh, it's Tohoku University. Yeah. And so this article, do fungi recognize shapes? So here's the article from Research News at Tohoku University. Do fungi recognize shapes? And what they did is see how they're like arranged in different like shapes. There's a circle and there's like an X.
Yes.
Yeah, they kind of are. But what they found is that they have an awareness of their surroundings, so that they will grow more on the outside of a thing than on the inside, because it's like they know that there's not anywhere to go. So at the edges of like an X, if you can imagine like an X shape, at the tips there, they end up growing more because there's more place to spread out.
That's interesting.
And so they consider this when they study this, their response to these shapes, and you can see a whole bunch in these studies, how they grow and branch out based on where, but they don't branch in the middle because there's like, why bother, right? And so they say it's a sign of intelligence, that there's some kind of way that they're understanding their surroundings and making choices about where and which directions to grow based on that. And the whole thing I thought was so ridiculous because there's I don't understand how you can jump to that conclusion that it's
that they understand,
that they're actually smart, that they know what they're doing. Because there's this thing called, I think it's called phototropism, is that the right word? But that's where plants will grow toward the light, you know? And it has nothing to do with them being smart. Like, you could interpret that as they're like, oh, they know where the sun is, so they want to grow that way.
Yeah.
But no, they just grow more on that side, and it bends the branch so that they angle into that way. And it's just this natural mechanism that's just evolutionary prescribed. They have no idea what's going on. Doesn't mean they're conscious. Anyway, so I found this very strange that they jumped to that conclusion. Anyway, long story
Poets are
short,
the ones supposed to be making those conclusions,
Yeah, I
not the
know,
scientists.
really. Yeah,
Like,
really.
we can make those leaps, people.
But it made for an interesting headline. I don't know. I was very confused. So anyway, that inspired this Sciku right here. Let's put her. Leaning one way, the money tree grasps economics. So there you go. You know, I mean, it really does understand supply and demand and, you know, all that kind of thing.
That's funny.
Because it grows toward the window.
Yeah.
As we know from the background in the cabin in Wrightwood, because there's a money tree back there. Is what I was thinking
true.
of. Yeah.
That definitely is true.
It
That's
is
funny.
much smarter than I realized, that money tree.
We should give it a little diploma.
We should. Yeah. But I got a master's degree in economics, I think. Working on it. Anyway, that is the Sciku for this week. That's the show for this week. Now, next week's prompt, Katie, what are you going to do?
Okay, next week's prompt is we're going to write more No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Well, it's me tough. With all the kids here.
I know, and
It's gonna be tough
so,
to write
but
something.
I thought we could use a little bit of a quasi break. Okay.
Okay.
So, write a poem in the first person perspective in which something is repaired with the use of a most unlikely tool.
Oh, that's interesting. That's good. Yeah, a lot of opportunities to
Yeah, but
be
I
funny
want it
with
to be
that.
unlikely, okay? There's no formal element here. I want it to actually be surprising, not like it was a Phillips head screwdriver. Like, that will not count unless it's something that should not involve a screwdriver, I suppose.
That's interesting. So this is one of those ones where your mind can start daydreaming about the topic.
Yeah, I think
You
it'll be
can,
fun. We haven't
you know,
had
think
one of
about it
these in a
right before
while.
you fall asleep and have some weird dream and maybe
And then
it'll-
follow it.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
it. So I think it'll be fun.
A very open-ended one. in
Yeah.
this direction.
Mhm.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Katie.
Well, I hope people enjoy writing it. And thanks to everyone's positivity on the Villanelle. Good job, guys. Good job.
Yeah,
Take a
great.
breather.
All right, so that is going to be the prompt for next week. And next week's guest is going to be, not that one, this one, James Tilley. So James has been in Rattle a bunch, and his son, at the age of very young, was in Rattle too, in Rattle's Young Poets Anthology. He has a new book out from Red Hen Press, Ripples in the Fabric of the Universe. So a lovely hardcover edition too, which was sent in the mail to me. So that's Jim Tilley. Going to be really excited to talk to him. Sunday, October 20th, that's next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, the regular time, with your prompt poems about a first-person poem in which something isn't required with the use of a most unlikely
It's
tool.
repaired with the use of a most unlikely
Repaired.
tool.
Okay,
But
I
it is
tried.
required. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's an R.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. It's been great. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.
Good night.